This is University Lecture. Welcome to another in a series of lectures and talks given on the campus of Iowa State University in Ames. Today, David H. Vernon, Dean of the College of Law at the University of Iowa, speaks on Law versus the People. Dean Vernon.
What I plan to do is raise several problem areas that I view as occupying civil libertarians over the next many years. And then I'd like to close my direct presentation by some comments on the New Left. I don't pretend to be an expert on the New Left, but I would like to at least raise the issue and perhaps get your reaction to it. The first thing I ought to say, of course, is that I am here representing myself and not the law school or the Civil Liberties Union. It's very difficult for me to divorce myself from the law school, but I can assure you that the law faculty is in disagreement with me at least 4/5 of the time, and on the other fifth they're very uncertain. The first point I'd like to raise is what seems to me to be a growing shift in emphasis in terms of equal opportunity. For many years, those of us who were liberals were fussing and working toward a society in which there would be equal opportunity, in which artificial barriers of race or religion, national origin, would be deemed irrelevant, and that members of the society would have an equal opportunity to go as far and as high as their talents would take them. Well, I think we have made tremendous progress along those lines, at least in a legal sense, in abolishing legal distinctions enforced by the state or the federal governments based on anything as irrelevant as a difference in race. And now that we've done that, it becomes obvious to all of us that we haven't done enough, that it's sort of absurd to talk about equal opportunity when we have vast segments of the society starting from a level which makes it almost impossible to take advantage of the equal opportunity. The problem seems to be that we've come close, I think, in legal terms to abolishing distinctions, artificial distinctions based on race, and we realize now that that was perhaps the easiest step in this development of a society in which people would have an equal opportunity. The problem now is to create, in fact, an equal opportunity society. And the question is how you go about that. The American Civil Liberties Union right now has appointed a committee consisting of really non-ACLU members to analyze and discuss and consider the problem of a civil right, a constitutional right to welfare, that is, to money and services from the government pegged at a level which makes it an in fact reality in terms of establishing a society in which there will be equality of opportunity. Which this means that the inquiry is, can we establish as a matter of law that a person has a right to a level of income, to a level of education that will permit talented people really to take advantage of their abilities. Certainly no court has indicated that this is a right. No legislature has recognize yet that it is a right. I am simply suggesting that within the next 20 years, this drive, I think, will reach maturity, and an effort will be made to establish something above a subsistence level of income as, in essence, guaranteed to every individual. That is, this is a right to life. This is a right to life in a society in which ability is permitted, is able to rise to its own level. Now, in legal terms, if this is established as a constitutional right, it is going to mean a major revolution in thinking about constitutional law. It may be established legislatively before it's established constitutionally. But at least the first issue I want to raise with you is the possibility of developing this kind of right as a constitutional right, a right guaranteed by the Constitution. I think it's going to come, but I think it's a long way off. The next issue I want to throw out deals with the draft. The draft's been with us for approximately 30 years. General Hershey's been with us for approximately the same period of time. The draft as it operates now seems to me to be wholly inequitable. I do not object to a draft system. Many of my colleagues do. I do not object to a system of drafting people for the military. I object to two phases of the present system, and I also object to using the draft as a penal measure to punish people for either what they said or what they did. The first part of the draft I object to is the student deferment. It seems to me to be indefensible. It operates to put into service people coming from the lower levels of our society in terms of the economics of the society. It puts into service immediately young men who either drop out of school or finish high school and do not go on. And I don't know of any manpower analysis that justifies the student deferment, any student deferment. I would advocate a system in which a lottery was held at the time a student or a man reaches the age of 18, and at that point a decision would be made that those with certain numbers would go and those with the other numbers would not. It seems to me it would be fair. It would apply to all people equally in the sense that everyone would have the same chance, and it would apply to all socioeconomic groups in the country. The second part of the present draft system I find terribly objectionable is the use of the local draft board. The problem I have is that the use of the local pool of men operates on a national basis very unequally. That is, you can have two men, one living in town A, the other living in town B. If the pool in town A is large, the man living there has very little chance of being drafted. The man who lives 20 miles away, or 30 miles, or 40 miles, in a pool of young men, which is relatively small, has a very high chance of being drafted. And I don't see how we can justify drafting from town B, that young man from town B, the same age, the same background, the same everything, except he doesn't live in the right town. It seems to me that we ought to establish a national standard for the operation of the draft. Now, finally on the draft, I find the statements by General Hershey urging draft boards to take into service young men who sit in draft offices or who protest in some illegal way. I find that to be totally offensive to the concept of a democratic society and a concept of a draft system which is feasible. It seems to me that the young men who sit in draft offices or who protest illegally should be subject to civil penalty, as I have no objection to them being fined after trial, going to jail in some cases. That seems to me to be a choice they've made. I do find it offensive that the action which would normally lead to this civil penalty, in addition to the civil penalty, the system operating then to put them into service. I can find no justification for that, and it seems to be the way the system is functioning, though. The third point I want to raise with you is I raised the draft because I fear it's going to be with us for another 30 years. And I hope within that time we can get it functioning in what I consider to be a democratic, equitable fashion. There was an attempt to do this in the last session. It failed, but I think the attempts will be continued, and they may succeed. I don't know. The great middle class in our society, which provides 95% of all college students, is not very favorably inclined to doing away with the student deferment. I don't know that they ever will be inclined to doing away with it, and I don't know whether the political pressure they can exert is sufficiently great to prevent it from ever being abolished. The next point I'd like to talk about is the problem of the public school systems and the substitution of the state or the school board or the school superintendent for the parent in deciding what proper dress is and what proper hairstyle is. We have had a rash of cases, I'm sure you're all familiar with them, in which an attempt has been made by local school authorities to dictate the way children dress or the way they wear their hair. Mini skirts and micro skirts and all sorts of other things are banned. In Dubuque, you can't have your sideburn down more than halfway down the ear. And the ACLU has been singularly unsuccessful in representing these people in court. In my experience, we haven't won any. The one case, I was involved in one which we won, but on a freak or a fluke. In this case, the mother was the barber, and she cut her child's hair just the way she liked it, which was down to, here's a boy, it was down to here, and it was fairly long. But the boy could see there was no physical danger. Well, we took that one to court, and the problem was the school board threw the child out, and the mother didn't send him back. She just said, I like the haircut. And then the school board took her to court, which was very nice, because it turned out she was a certified public school teacher. And we were able to prove she was teaching the child at home, and that was the end of the case. But unless you've got a certified public school teacher at home, we aren't going to win very many. I find it pretty offensive to have the state, in the form of the school board, telling parents and telling children what they can wear and the way they ought to wear their hair. The notion of the state substituting for the parent is a difficult one here, because most parents want the school to do just what they're doing, because the parents can't control the children. I'm sure that most of the pressure for this kind of regulation comes not from the school board or the teachers, it comes from the parents whose children are going to school with short skirts or with long hair. And the children will not do as they're told, and the parents throw up their hands and say, okay, state, you do it. The problem is that when the state or the school board capitulates to that kind of pressure, they also then impose their standards on other parents who are really fully prepared to be responsible for what the child does, who have not asked for help, who don't want help. And it seems to me that the school boards, winning as they are, somehow have to be reached and have to understand that what they're doing really is a job for responsible parents, and the way to solve the problem, to my mind, is not to impose some median kind of level for the sideburn or for the skirt on everyone. In terms of the student, the haircut, the dress is in part a form of expression, a form of rebellion, and I think they ought to be permitted to rebel or express themselves in that way. It's totally harmless, and the argument that the decision is an educational decision because it diverts the attention of other students from the educational process has always struck me as being unprovable. It may divert the male instructor when the miniskirts or microskirts are involved, but it seems to me he ought to be able to control himself or take another kind of job. It's an odd thing. I don't quite know why I get so exercised about haircuts and the dress of school children. I've got an 11-year-old boy who's got hair hanging over his eyes, and I'm convinced that we're going to get him thrown out of school one day. I also have had some experience with principals. When I lived in Seattle, there were 2 high schools. In one, the principal announced that he had lived through the beehive for the girls, and he figured he could live through the long hair for the boys. And with 2,000 students, he had something like 2 boys with long hair. In the other school, which was an older one and much more established, they prohibited long hair, and they had something like 22 boys out of school the first week, and they had trouble getting them back. They had regulations as to the miniskirt, and you couldn't have panties showing below the miniskirt. Well, a style came out where they made the pants the same material as the dress, and they didn't. They came down fairly low. All those girls were sent home, and they took off the long pants and put on their regular panties and came back, and they were fine. The whole thing seems to border on the absurd to me, and while it may not seem important, and some people think that we shouldn't get fussed about this, there are more important things to get excited about, and I agree. Somehow, I find it just so dead wrong for public officials to tell people how to dress, that it seems to me that the people interested should be trying to exert pressure, not on the courts, I think it's almost hopeless for the next several years, but on the school boards, to try to talk some sense into them. I simply don't think they're doing any good, and I think they're doing a lot of harm, and I find it pretty indefensible. It's just not a function of the state to tell you how long your hair has to be. It may be when you go in the Army, but it shouldn't be aside from that. And the next point, and this is next to last, and I made this point in other speeches, and that is that it seems to me that one of the civil liberties issues we're going to face within the next few years, and I don't think it's very far away, is a return to the McCarthy era. and that's Joe and not Gene. Many of you are a little young to remember the McCarthy era. Those of us who were on campuses then recall it as being a very unpleasant time. I think we're about to return there, not just in Iowa, but just generally. And I've got a theory. I've got a theory about most things, and I have a theory about this, and it is, none of these have ever been tested. The theory is that at least starting with World War I, after each one of our engagements or wars, we have had a reaction in which there has been a public outcry to blame someone for something. It's not to blame people for the war, but you can't win a war. People are dead. Your own people are dead. And somehow there's an urge to punish somebody for that fact. And after World War I, we had the Palmer raids and the attacks on the foreign-born, the anarchists, this whole group, which was totally powerless, but it was nice to be able to find someone like that to attack because it didn't hit back. World War II, Korea, we had that whole series of nonsense going on. We had red channels, we had people barred from the networks, we had people denied jobs, teaching, because of what they said. Not what they did, but what they said. And often what people thought they thought. Now, I think we are going to have to find some scapegoat for Vietnam. And the odd thing is, I think the group that would be classified as the anti-Vietnam group, the anti-Vietnam War group, will be the group under attack, which is not a very consistent kind of thing to happen, to blame the war on them. But it's not a question of blaming the war, it's just finding someone to flay. The New Left is very difficult to define, at least as I see it, and I've only seen the small slices of it. It's made up of if there are 50 people in a group, there are at least 35 or 40 different subgroups, mainly one-man subgroups. Sometimes they get together as many as 4 people. They are, it seems to me, pulled together by a feeling of total frustration, total disaffection with our society as it exists now. They are, as a group, seem to me to be totally frustrated with democracy in the sense of using democratic processes to affect change. They have a complete distrust of what you and I, you older fellas, might have called a power structure, but we don't have a power structure anymore. It's a military-industrial complex. And they're just completely alienated, I think, in the main, at least the hardcore, from democracy. The frustration they feel, they add to that something called the Nuremberg ethic. The Nuremberg ethic, as most of you will know, goes to the point that it's up to the individual to determine whether a specific law is moral or immoral. And if it's immoral, it becomes illegal. And therefore, it's immoral and illegal to obey an illegal, immoral statute, which happens to be legal. They've taken the Nuremberg concept and have adopted it in a very personal kind of way. And they feel they can do it because they reject any concept that you can change for the better through established procedures. Now, with that kind of frustration and this kind of tie to the Nuremberg ethic, it seems to me that the group, particularly the campus group, and not only on our campus but generally, have rejected any concept that traditional free speech, the justification for free speech, the exchange of ideas in the marketplace, being able to persuade people, that concept seems to me to be foreign to what it is they're doing. It's not a question of free speech, because they don't think they can persuade with speech. They don't think they can accomplish an affirmative kind of goal. They can't accomplish what they want merely by talking, merely by peaceful demonstration. They somehow feel that they have to express themselves in something stronger than words. And then we go to the kind of obstruction that we had at Iowa City on November 1st, particularly, which was a very peaceful kind of obstruction. It was a lie-in. Everybody got down, and they sort of permitted themselves, and in essence was saying, we dare you to stop us. We are violating the law, but we cannot permit people to go see the Marines because the Marines are immoral. Now, in doing that, of course, they denied the right of access to people who wanted to be immoral and join the Marines. Seems to me those who want to join the Marines ought to be able to go see the Marines. And that happened. Some people took off their shoes, the first bunch, and sort of climbed over. But the second bunch wasn't that polite. Now, I have, I think, some understanding of what's bothering the students. I think. I don't know really, but I think I do. And the fact that I understand it doesn't make it any more palatable to me. I think their actions have been outrageous. I think they've done more to hurt whatever cause it is they're trying to forward than you can imagine. This kind of thing hardens opposition and makes people flatly refuse to listen to them. They will not. I don't think they really have tried the established routes anyhow. They have not tried the established routes. I also don't think that the Vietnam War is really the issue. Now that may be contrary to what many of you feel, but it is an issue. But if it weren't for the Vietnam War, I believe the same kind of conduct would be going on aimed at some other social problem, some other problem. This feeling of frustration, I don't know quite why it arose or how it arose. Part of it is the uncertainty of the draft situation. Part of it is I think the change in style perhaps, but maybe more when President Kennedy was assassinated and Johnson came in. There's just a different kind of ethic, at least that exudes from Washington. It's a different style. It's not the kind of thing that President Kennedy was putting forward, but it's a pragmatic approach to social problems. And I must say that President Johnson, in his tenure, has done more in terms of trying at least to start to face social problems than I think all of his predecessors put together. And I am not here to campaign for Lyndon Johnson. I'm just trying to point out that pragmatically, and in fact, I think that the Johnson administration has done more in the area of medical care, trying to attack poverty. You can go right down the line. I think they have tried to do more and have accomplished more, as a matter of fact, than we've accomplished at any time in our history or all through our history. But it's a style difference. It's a style that does not attract the intellectual. And I don't mind being despised by the right, but I really get very unhappy when everyone else hates me too. And maybe I deserve it. My problem of not having the courage of my convictions is that my conviction is that the legal process and the processes we've established here are open processes, and that we can accomplish social goals, affirmative social goals and ends within the process. And with that kind of conviction, I don't think it's a lack of courage that keeps me from going outside the legal process we have. But it's a very difficult thing to explain. I simply don't know. I don't know how to talk to the New Left. I don't know how many of you read Andy Capp, but he's a little fella in a comic strip. A man came up to Andy. His first panel was, he said, problem with society is no communication. Second panel, a man says to Andy, Andy, my wife doesn't understand me. How about yours? Andy, in the third caption, said, well, hell, my wife doesn't even understand me. Why should she understand you? Fourth panel, as I was saying. Okay. Well, that's the end, gentlemen and ladies. Thank you.
You have been listening to another in a series of lectures given on the campus of Iowa State University in Ames. Today, David H. Vernon, Dean of the College of Law at the University of Iowa, spoke on Law versus the People. University Lecture is a presentation of Iowa State University Radio.